Good afternoon, everybody. Matt, when we left here on Friday, we talked about all kinds of fun stuff happening. Chaos if Duke won, they did. And you took reverse psychology and said Alabama should beat Georgia, and you'll believe it when you saw it, and we saw it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the Alabama Georgia thing feels almost probably like a bit of relief for Georgia
Hmm.
in a sense. I mean, it's a game they dominated. It's a game on paper that I thought they should dominate. Quite
Hmm.
frankly, talked about it a lot last week when we did it. I said, everything on paper, Georgia's gotten better throughout the year. They're a little bit more healthy. It was such a narrow margin of victory in Athens earlier this year. I was like, everything points to Georgia winning this and even winning convincingly. So, but I can't pick it until I see Georgia beat Alabama.
Hmm.
Um, it, they did all of the things that you almost kind of expected them to do to that Alabama team. Alabama could not move the football. -3 rushing yards. People have probably heard that 1,000 times since the game happened on Saturday, but it's true.
Hmm.
And a lot of credit goes to Kirby Smart. I've seen different pages. I don't know if they're necessarily discrediting or they're pointing to a glaring inefficiency in Alabama's like game planning overall. But Georgia's special teams in particular was a massive difference in this game. It's probably a more like less talked about unit in terms
Hmm.
of these Georgia football teams. But Georgia on special teams has been really good throughout honestly most of Kirby Smart's run. You look at their kickers and punters throughout the years; they've been really good. But they've also been very good in blocking kicks. Kirby Smart's now 18-0 when he's blocked a kick, whether that be a
Hmm.
punt or a field goal. Um, and that's where they won the football game. Is they were able to dominate defensively, and through their special teams, they were able to control field position very well. And it played a large part because Alabama had to drive the field every time they touched the football, and Georgia just did not
Hmm.
end up over 4 quarters of football making a big difference, 21 points worth.
You know, um, it was an impressive win, no question about it. But as is always the case, after it was over, and I don't know about you, but for some reason I kept hearing from the people who were, pushing the Alabama narrative of making the playoffs. Well, they played against Georgia without 20 of their key players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, you know, so what? It's, you know, they did. All right. You say they're getting them back. And then
Mm-hmm.
a couple years ago, you ding FSU because their quote unquote quarterback wasn't there. So, you know, they don't get it.
Yeah,
So 20 Alabama players can be off. One quarterback from FSU can not be available, and they bounce them.
yeah. It has been fun when the discussion got stirred up about Alabama and whether or not they should make the playoff, because in their last 5 games they're 2-3.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is. That's the truth of it. They have not played their best football of late. And that's partially due to injuries. But guess what? Everybody else has injuries.
Right.
It's been amazing the 2 times that Georgia's beaten Alabama, just how hard they've fallen back on the injuries. Guys, Georgia was without a lot of players as well. Like they're battling the injury bug as well. Maybe they did a better job at recruiting depth. Maybe theirs weren't as key in certain places because Georgia was missing their starting center Drew Bobo on
Hmm.
Saturday night. And to be honest with you, I couldn't tell all that much. Tim
Hmm.
Keenan was a big factor in that first game in Athens, and he was
Yeah.
almost non-existent at a position where you would expect him to be felt, given the
Right.
absence of Drew Bobo for Georgia.
Hmm.
But he wasn't there. He wasn't to be seen.
Right.
So falling back on the injury excuses is one that's rough. But I've seen people that have talked out of both sides of their mouth over the last 2 years in terms of Alabama making the playoff. I
But oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I can sit here and I can easily make a case for Alabama to be out of the playoff. They have not looked good. They have not looked like a playoff team over the last couple
Mhm.
of weeks. But on that same side of things, I can't say that and then also look at last year when I sat at the table and said SMU can't be punished for playing the extra game. Alabama
Right.
could not be punished for playing the extra game. Um, and in the politics of it all, you smoking crack if you think Greg Sankey was going to let the loser of the SEC championship game get excluded from this playoff format. There would have been hell to pay for it.
Agreed. And here's the thing that bothers me. Georgia played a hell of a football game. Okay.
Mhm.
Why would you try to water down that win when they earned it?
Yeah, I again, interesting case. I don't really think Georgia was sitting there, worried about their playoff case or
No.
their strength of the win.
No.
But it is interesting to diminish. It's now Georgia's now beaten every team that was on their schedule,
Right.
and they avenged their only loss in a convincing fashion, similar to that of 2017. But it's not something that they needed. And in fact, I was talking to people yesterday. They're like, well, why was Georgia the 3 seed and Ohio State the 2 seed? Like Georgia's a conference champion. They've played a tougher schedule, this, that, and the other. Both of their losses are by 3 points, by the way.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which is a fine and fair case. But I can tell you, sitting here today, as someone who has a rooting interest in the University of Georgia, I'm happy. I'm happy in the 3 seed. I get the winner of Ole Miss and Tulane, a team that has their head coach and one that has recently replaced a head coach,
right,
versus the winner of Texas A&M and Miami. I'm fine with that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to Notre Dame in a minute, but I had spoken to a number of people who told me that Jim Phillips wasn't leaving Grandville, Texas until an ACC team made the playoffs. And I'll tell you, for me, and I know you had a rooting interest in Georgia, but for me, the most entertaining game of the weekend was the Duke upset of Virginia. It was a fun game to watch.
It was a fun game to watch. Really one that is probably the most consequential, if I were to guess. Just because it's the game where you point to it, and as much as people want to point to Alabama, Georgia potentially, or that Texas Tech BYU game, this was the deciding factor in whether or not Miami was going to get into the playoff.
Right.
The path for Notre Dame was going to be they needed Virginia to win. That was pretty much it. They needed Virginia to win and Texas Tech to win. They got one out of two of those results. But yeah, you talked about it. The Miami situation is as simple as the ACC was not getting left out of this playoff. There's politics involved. That's the reason Notre Dame dropped 2 spots over 2 weeks, despite their body of work in those 2 weeks being a 29-point road win against Stanford. When you stack it up against what they were facing, like Alabama's body of work is escaping Auburn, Alabama by 7 points and then getting shelled in the SEC title game.
Right.
Miami's resume, while people will point out, be like, well, it's a 28-point road victory. It is. That's nice. Miami, again, still did not play a good first half. Left that first half in a tight game, and then late in the fourth quarter tacks on a couple scores. It looks a lot nicer at the end. It's not like they just were like a world beater. We're like, well, we just have to put Miami in. They've looked so good over these last couple of weeks. That's not the reason. It's the same reason Alabama was never going to move. It's politics.
Yeah, and it's a rare situation where Notre Dame loses in politics. But let me get back to one quick thing I want to ask about. Why have conference championship games if they don't matter? Because to me, all right, Duke may have lost 5 games. They won the damn championship. If we look at this in college basketball, right? And it's okay, fine. I understand it's apples to oranges. I get that. But you can win the regular season championship, go into the tournament, and we've had, how many times have we had 12 and 8, or teams with either 500 schedules or in 500 records, or sometimes even sub 500 records, make the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to me, if you win the tournament, if you win the championship, then that's the team that represents the. If the ACC wanted their, um, have a champion that is in there, in the four champions. Indiana would have been there. Texas Tech would have been there. Indiana would have been there, um, and um, and Duke. Whether you like it or not, at five, that would have been that. They would have been a championship team. Um, I just there's no sense in playing these damn games if they don't count for anything.
Yeah, and in that case, that's on Jim Phillips and the way that they've structured that thing in the ACC. Now,
Mm-hmm.
granted, it's not just the ACC's problem in terms of the structure to get into conference championship games. It applies to a lot of places since the realignment and expansion of the conferences. You can't
Mm-hmm.
play everybody, and you can't really put it in divisions where you play everybody either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough to pick them. But this is what I went back to in the case against Miami. Everybody's like, well, SMU and Louisville aren't that bad of losses. That's true, but they also were bad enough in conference that they lost the two games that, had they won them, would
Mm-hmm.
have put them over Duke. Duke's conference winning percentage in terms of the opponents they beat was higher than Miami's.
Mm-hmm.
They played a tougher conference schedule than Miami did.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying a lot in the ACC, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have been there. Um, so say what you will about Miami and the games they did or didn't lose, the teams they did or didn't beat, but there was legitimate case for them not to be in this playoff. There was a reason they were not in the conference championship game.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't win the games they were supposed to. So, luck be to them that Virginia found a way to lose that thing, because that was the only way they were getting in.
Yeah. Now we go to Notre Dame. Now you and I had a fun texting back and forth, and then a little bit of a conversation. You're going to have a column coming out. Um, I don't have any problem with debating Notre Dame's worthiness of being in the playoffs. I mean, that's fair. What I don't like, because again, Notre Dame gets it started off with the BCS, and it ended up in this playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame gets a seat at that table. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they're the only independent that does. They don't have to play in a championship game ever. They get to keep all the money that they make, okay, which was $20 million last year in just the CFP. They have their own contract with NBC, which they get to keep all the money,
Mm-hmm.
and they are bitching because they lost out to the Miami and the Miami and Alabama situation. Again, do you have an argument that they should be in? Absolutely. Okay. I can see how you could argue them in. I can see how you could argue them out. But to actually say, I'm not going to play in a bowl game because we didn't get treated properly is just, the height of hypocrisy. I mean, you've been given a seat at a table that no one else gets.
Mm-hmm.
They cut deals for you, which no one else gets. And then you don't get what you want, and you decide, I'm sorry, I'm not going to play in a bowl game because I was disrespected. Believe me when I tell you, if Alabama would have been knocked out, like you said, Sankey would have strangled somebody. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, Alabama would have played in the bowl game.
Yeah, in all likelihood, they would have. And I understood all of those are very fair and valid reasons. In my devil's advocate way
Right.
of thinking
Sure.
here, it's the way that it happened. Like the reason that I have a problem with the committee's decision overall is not because they picked Miami. Miami is they're bumped up right next to them statistically in
Sure.
terms of like where their strength of schedule and strength of record and all that ranks is. Like, I think Notre Dame was ahead by like 1 or 2 places in both of those metrics, so
Mhm.
not very much. And Miami head to head. The thinking and the logic makes sense. It was the way they went about it. Same thing that we talked about with Lane Kiffin, all those times. It wasn't the fact that he took the LSU job; it's
No.
the process in which he did it.
Mhm.
Um, and so when you pull the rug out from under a team like that, that didn't, they were firmly in it, and then they just kind of weren't, and it was nothing that they did. It was purely a failure on the committee's part, which is a whole other discussion on
Sure.
why that group of seemingly 11 faceless people
Mhm.
and whoever the poor poor idiot is they stick up there to do an interview every week.
Right.
There's no accountability in that room. They failed to adhere to their own guidelines for multiple weeks, mind you, based on the criteria that they set forth for themselves. Like, these are their
Mhm.
own guidelines that they've written out, and they say they group teams and rank the groupings of the teams.
Mhm.
Miami and Notre Dame have been in that same group for a couple of weeks now.
Mhm.
You don't make this move now. Like, you don't make the Alabama move like 2 weeks ago. You do
Mhm.
that when it's supposed to be done. You overreacted so much in their initial rankings that they had to go back and fix it at the end. And in them doing that, they just screwed Notre Dame, not because what Notre Dame had put on paper, but because Notre Dame had this belief that they were in the playoff. And then over the course of 2 weeks, through you essentially fixing stuff in back channels, you have now pulled them out of the playoff with really no true explanation other than if Hunter Yurachek had gotten up there and said, "We messed up. Both of
Mhm.
these teams have the metrics to be ahead of Notre Dame. That we
Mhm.
should have done that in the first place. This is our fault." They didn't do that. They would never do that. Um, and quite frankly, it's hard to be upset with Notre Dame for not wanting, like, those kids in that room have to be devastated. Just the way things shook out. And then on the other side of things, this is more of an overarching thing. People are going to say this about Notre Dame playing in a bowl game, and it's fair. But I also want you to look at the teams that were offered bowl games and turned them down. Iowa State turned a bowl game down. Florida State turned a bowl game down. Kansas turned a bowl game down. There's a few other Power Four conference teams that turned bowl games down. They're not of the same level of Notre Dame, but they did do that. And why did they do that? It's the way the calendar works. Would you rather focus on roster retention, staffing changes, and recruiting, or would you rather prep your team to go play in the Cheez-It Bowl? I'm focusing on the other stuff because the other stuff's going to give me a bigger chance or a better chance of being successful in that next year than playing in the Cheez-It Bowl would.
Then why do bowls at all?
It's a fantastic question because this is a problem that the playoffs created for themselves. They created it in the 4 team because they diminished the meaning of the bowl games when they created that playoff. All of the branding and all of the marketing shifted to just how important the playoff was. And really, towards the end of that 14 playoff, it largely shifted into how unimportant the bowl games were. Like, this is messaging that was done through ESPN and larger entities such as them. Um, and so when you send that messaging out, you send that signaling out, and you tell the general populace, hey, you had a nice season, but guess what? That bowl game, it's not the playoffs. So does it really even matter? This is going to happen. And it was always in the hope of expansion. That's where it was headed when they got to 4. That's where it was headed when they changed to 12. Like, as soon as they got to 12, they started talking about 16. You notice how they started the ranking show off yesterday?
Well,
Kirk
why don't they
Herbstreit,
just go to 132?
yeah, Kirk Herbstreit starts pitching a 16 team. Like,
Okay.
it doesn't matter how far you expand this thing out. No one's ever going to be happy. There's always going to be a Notre Dame on the outside looking in. It's just the numbers at which you're leaving people out at. Like, now, instead of getting left out at 5, You're left out at 13, or you're
Right.
left out at 12, given the way the thing is now. So there's always going to be teams that are left out. They do it in college basketball. They've
Right.
got a little thing that says the first four out. And if I remember correctly, I think Dick Vitale lost his mind last year based on one of the teams in the first four out. So it doesn't matter how many. Shouldn't BYU be held to the same sentiment as Alabama? Yeah, I mean, if they were held to the same sentiment as Alabama, they're still out based on where they were in the initial rankings and not being a conference champion. Sky Papa 72. So when you have that, it's never going to be enough. These bowl games are never going to really truly matter in the same fashion that they did. So,
Well, there's 32 of them. So, and for the record, the reason why there's 32 is because ESPN uses them as programming and advertising. That being said, the participants, when you go to a bowl game, what basically Notre Dame turned down $3 million, which would have been their payout for going to that bowl. Which, you know, I think we have too many bowls, to be honest. But I also understand, and later in the week we're going to have Jack Healy on. For those of you who don't know who Jack is, and you probably don't, Jack's job with as a consultant with ESPN was slotting bowl games, okay, putting them together, and then staffing the bowl games. So he has a very intimate idea of how these bowls work, from the first bowl game of the season to the championship game. And Jack, and we'll have a chance later in the week to talk to Jack and really get an inside look at the bowl games. But where the bowl games are important really is for the cities that host them. It's not, and to get a Miami, to get a Notre Dame trip to Orlando may not have meant anything to Notre Dame, but had they played BYU, which would have been fascinating, frankly, I would think. For many years, they were the two most successful independents when everybody else went to conference. Would have been they probably would have sold the place out, and they probably would have done well. That is not the case in all the bowls. We all know. They don't usually sell them out. And you could have walked up the other day in Charlotte and picked up a ticket to the ACC championship game, right at the door, and paid face value for it. So yeah, I get it, but it rubbed me the wrong way, the way Notre Dame handled it. It's like, I'm sorry, we're egregious. We got snubbed, therefore we're not going to play. And I say that, as I said before, because Notre Dame gets so much in the way of special treatment that others in other conferences don't. And for them to be pissed off and say, we're not going to participate, okay, fine, you're not going to participate, but at the end of the day, you basically, to me anyway, as a traditionalist, showed that you're not team players. That you don't give a damn if you're not in the bowl, championship series, or in this case, playoffs. Then I don't want to go anywhere. Okay, fine. You don't want to go anywhere, but we give you every possible thing that no one else gets that second bite of the apple. Alabama doesn't get that money, by the way. Georgia doesn't get that money. All the money that go to the playoffs and the bowl games go to the conferences. And then the conferences divvy out the money in what is called pods. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they get each year the they the bowl payouts and the payouts from they call it units. I said pods. I'm sorry, it's units. And you get the unit. So the unit goes. And by the way, so what that means is when Georgia goes to play in their upcoming um, bowl game, um, the Southeastern Conference will pay for everything. They'll pay for the flights. They'll pay for the hotel. They pay for everything. The university is not out a penny during the and that's bowl games, and that's in this case playoff games. So when it's all said and done, the Southeastern Conference collects, whatever it is that the playoff is $4 million per team um, per game. So as I said earlier, last year Notre Dame, as they made it all the way to the title game, um, received a total of $20 million, which they didn't have to share. It went
Mm-hmm.
directly to their bottom line.
Yeah.
So I guess, as I said before, the thing that bothers me about it was the optics. Number one, you're right; it was like a Lane Kiffin deal.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have the? Does Lane have the right to go coach at LSU? Absolutely. Did he have handled it properly? No. Does
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame have a legitimate bitch to say we should have been there? Sure, they do. Just
Mm-hmm.
as you pointed out, oh, Alabama and Miami do as well. Did
Mm-hmm.
did the bowl championship group screw up? Absolutely, they did. No question about it. But it just rubbed me the wrong way that Notre Dame receive so much in the way of special treatment that the least they could have done was just say, all right, you know what? I didn't like it. I don't like it. It's got to be fixed. But I'll see BYU, in the bowl game.
Yeah, no, they're definitely, and that is a certain part. Is it does feel very kind of like childish, like you're almost throwing a temper tantrum by not playing in the game. It's similar to the way the committee handled it. Is like Notre
Mhm.
Dame, they kind of have a reason, but the way they went about it is again all wrong optically. So so yeah, they receive a lot and they don't give back. I do have the list of teams that chose not to go to a bowl. It's Iowa State, Kansas State, Florida State, Auburn, UCF, Baylor, Rutgers, Temple, and Kansas, along with Notre Dame. Those are the teams that were offered bowl games and chose not to. So there is
Well, most
that.
of those were 6-6 teams, right?
Yeah, 5-7, or they were towing the line and they lost their coach, which is in the way
That
of
was Iowa State.
Iowa State and Kansas State both.
Right.
And both of those schools, in fairness to them, they received $500,000 fines for choosing to go that route.
Right.
That's not going to come Notre Dame's way ever.
Right.
So there is that. So it's again, it's a system problem in college football. Everybody says it, and they're going to continue saying it until something changes. But it's the way the system works right now. And if you think that this happening, this Notre Dame being left out, because I've heard it a few times. It's like, well, now maybe they'll join a conference. That's not what's going to come of this.
No, they have no incentive to join conference.
No, they have no incentive. Heck, starting next year, they are treated like a conference champion if they are inside of the top 12. If they are
Right.
inside of the top 12, they are guaranteed a bid into that college football playoff,
Mm-hmm.
as if they were a conference champion. That rings true. The agreement they have in place stands for a 12-team and a 14-team format.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll probably be in next year, assuming that it stays at 12 and some significant change doesn't happen in the
Mm-hmm.
offseason to the format. So no, they have there's no financial incentive.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to get assurances from the playoff that basically this doesn't happen again. And this was assurances granted before this happened, by the way.
Right.
This wasn't like a knee-jerk reaction to this situation.
Right.
The Notre Dame went out and got this thing in writing. And when you add that in, there's just no reason. Oh, by the way, the only like friendship they had with a conference, that conference just burned that bridge. They talked about the ACC kind of like the relationships damaged was the words of Notre Dame's athletic director today. And again, while it may feel a bit childish on the outside, that conference pretty much ran a presidential campaign as to why you should not be in the college football playoff. So it's also hard to be all that upset at them being upset with the ACC.
It's understood, but at the same time, once again, not that I want to play, when Notre Dame was shopping for a conference, to put their team, and we're talking about the basketball and Olympic teams,
Mm-hmm.
it was the ACC that reached out and said, look, I understand you don't want to be in a conference football wise. If you agree to play 4 to 5 games against our teams on your schedule, we will give you half money basically, for all the others, for all the other sports. That was the best deal on the table they got. Notre Dame couldn't get into Big Ten on that same situation. They obviously didn't attempt to get to the SEC on that deal. They obviously didn't attempt to get to the Pac-12 on that deal, and at the time when Pac-12 existed, and obviously it wasn't going to work in the Big Ten. I'm sorry, the Big 12, because that really didn't fit their situation. So they can bitch and moan all they want to about the ACC, but where else are they going to go?
Yeah, for the bitching and moaning at the ACC, this is a two-way street here for them.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the pandemic? They had to play in the ACC. They had to play in that conference if they wanted to really be able to play football that season.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the ACC hasn't just never done anything for Notre Dame,
right?
And we're just going to burn the conference down. Like the fan reaction is really where I draw the biggest issue with Notre Dame and all this, because they are acting like Notre Dame is God's gift to college football. They're a good program. They're a strong program. They're a strong brand that exists outside of just college football as well. All those things are acknowledged. You're not God's gift. Yes, you made the national title last year. Good for you. Prior to that, all you did was get shellacked in playoffs left and right after not playing in conferences. So let's not act like Notre Dame is something that they're not here. And what they aren't is God's gift to football.
Well, they haven't won a championship since Lou Holtz was coaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fairness, if the guy didn't leave to go to LSU, Notre Dame wasn't firing Brian Kelly anytime soon.
No.
So you stumbled into Marcus Freeman in a sense, and he's been very good, and he's going to continue to be very good.
Yeah.
So you got that aspect as well.
To me, when you're given such a wonderful benefit, right, that you don't have to play in a conference, you don't have to play in a conference championship game. We're talking about football now. Your Olympic sports are in a very good conference when it comes to A, Olympic sports, and B, when it comes to being fair and paying out. They didn't have to pay out half to Notre Dame. It could have been much less, but they didn't. They gave them a full share. A half share. So I it's just a matter to me of, I think in hindsight, okay, in a couple weeks or months from now, they'll probably feel badly that it happened this way. But that'll be because they're gonna. They're gonna sit down with Jim Phillips and tomorrow and start working on other stuff, because basketball and all that. So
Yeah.
They're not going to pull their team out of the conference. I mean, they're not going to pull out of the ACC. They can, as a matter of fact. They've signed a grant of rights, which runs through 2036.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want out, they're going to have to pay their way out of it, which Notre Dame would never do.
Yeah.
So, it's just, to me, it boils down to what you had mentioned earlier. It's an optical thing. Okay. Do you want to, if you want to complain, if you feel that you justifiably were wronged, I get it. I understand it. And that's fine. You have every right to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But to choose not to play, and you listed out a group of teams that chose not to play, which is fair. I mean, I can understand the coaching situations, okay, because what do you're going in there with, there's not going to be game plans that have been put together solidly. There's a bunch of stuff that's chaotic, and maybe you walk away from $1 million or whatever it is that you might have made in a bowl game, because those guys weren't making they weren't New Year's Six bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
FSU didn't even have a 6-win schedule, so I'm not sure even how they turned down a bowl game, I guess, based on what is the academic issue from a standpoint of, I think it's your grade point average gets you up to the to measure like a 6 victory. I mean, it's some cockamamie thing just because they don't have enough teams to play in bowl games. And the rest of them, we're going to pull the needle anyway. Notre Dame pulls the needle.
Yeah.
And when you've got I think a BYU Notre Dame game would have been entertaining.
I think you have an argument there for the two teams that really felt like they had the most legitimate case of being wronged by the committee there. Like there's a sense of like get back. Here's a follow-up question, Jim, that I'm curious about. Because I think back to that Pop-Tarts Bowl last year. I think it was Iowa State and Miami that played in it.
I know Miami was in it.
Yeah, and this was the Miami team that had Cam Ward and all those guys. Sure. And all of them sat out in the second half, and that was a game that Miami was leading at the half, and then they lost in the second half. Like, is it worth Notre Dame going down there to play in it if, like, it's now at a point where these teams probably view bowl games as like if I've got a really important guy, like if I'm Notre Dame and I am going to play in that Pop-Tart Bowl against BYU, why would I play CJ Carr when he is an instrumental part to my team next season? There's this game, it gives you no benefit. You get the money regardless. Like, why would you play your quarterback next year? Jeremiah Love wasn't playing it anyways. So how depleted of a product are you getting if Notre Dame were to have accepted that bid?
You bring up a good point. I look at it like, here are the two universities who were independent because, number one, which they will constantly tell you, they're being discriminated against because they have their religious backgrounds. Okay. Those were the two poster children for that. I can't honestly, because it bothers me. What Kirby went off on the fact that FSU had 15 or 20 players who didn't play in that bowl game.
Yeah.
Against them in the Orange Bowl. I either you choose, if you're going to want to not play in a bowl game, all right, and the team votes not to play, not the coach, not the athletic director, not the governor, but the team chooses not to play, then fine, don't play. But what bothered me in that second half is Cam Ward wasn't going to lose any of his draft stock if he came in for a few series and kept Miami from losing. That's on Cam Ward.
Yeah.
Okay, that's on Cam Ward and Cam Ward's agent. To me, you're not a teammate if that's the way you want to play it. Then why put the damn uniform on and play? You could get hurt in the first series just as easily as you can get hurt in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the injury argument is just one that like I tend to bring up because it seems like everybody brings it up. It's not one. I mean, you go back and you listen to Kirby Smart after that Georgia Tech game this year. He said, like guys, if we're worried about injuries, then we're not going to practice this week. Like if you're worried about injuries, can happen at any time. They can happen during the game. They can happen away from practice. They can happen at practice. Like there's so many times. And if you're playing afraid of injury, then you got a scared football team overall. And it's a point that rings true. It's an excuse that a lot of people fall back on when they're making decisions. And, sometimes it's fair. Like when you look at it in principle, the thought process of first-round picks sitting out of bowl games, it's an understandable one because, if I'm a top 10 pick and I tear my ACL, there's a chance that I'm, now a second-round pick, and that's a significant drop-off in money. Like that's where it kind of makes sense. But yeah, it goes back to where if you're playing as a team and you're playing afraid of injuries, then you might as well just not be playing at all.
Well, let me ask you this, Matt. Okay, we're in a new world now, right? Let's stay away. Well, let's use Cam Ward as an example for just a moment. Let's say Cam Ward is making $4 million. I'm paying you $4 million. Are you going to sit out that football game? Because I'm paying you for it. Am I going to let you sit out that football game?
Yeah, not if you're breaching a contract. That actually brings up something that came out, and people have been using it as a negative recently in terms of Georgia's taking their former edge rusher, now Missouri edge rusher, Damon Wilson, to court over $390,000 in damages. If this is in the contract, and I feel like Georgia's really the first place because I think it's been in multiple instances, Georgia's really the first place to act on it. There's buyout clauses in some of these contracts. Like these are still contracts these kids are signing in reference to get this money. The boosters aren't just walking up to these guys, handing them, a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million and just being like, all right, man, go have fun. Like there's a contractual agreement that has to be signed and is signed. So, if you're building it into these contracts, that's really your best way to save these bowl games, to have the best players on the field. Now, if this is in your contract and you still want to do that, like Damon Wilson did when he decided to enter the transfer portal, because that $390K is the buyout. That $390K is something that he referenced in his recruiting. Really a big reason why he's at Missouri and not at Ohio State is Missouri was willing to fork up that money in case Georgia were to activate that clause they had in that contract. So there's certain things that, like, on the outside looking in, when you don't really dig into it, it's going to look bad. Like if you just look at it from the 1,000-foot view, Georgia suing a former player over, what they call deemed like lost wages and damages.
Sure.
It'd be the same thing as if you've signed a contract to play this number of games or play this season for this team, and this is the buyout if you don't fulfill your requirements, or you owe this back if you don't fulfill your requirements. It'd be the same thing as a team activating that in a bowl clause.
Right. I mean, if you go back, I think a lot of this concern, being injured concern, comes back to Willis McGahee when he was with Miami and he played in that championship game against Ohio State, and he got hit in the knee, and that knee issue became a serious problem because of the like you said, you can injure yourself and drop draft choices. Well, Willis McGahee cost himself a first-round draft choice and went to like a third or fourth-round draft choice. And he sat out the first year of his pro career with Buffalo. And he didn't have a very long career. I mean, might have been 4 or 5 years, in the NFL. I get that, but now that I'm paying you to play. I don't understand. The other thing is, so many coaches, when they, and we're talking about not just the minors, we're talking about the majors, the big guys.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how important that extra time you get to have in a bowl game is to the fact that you can actually bring in some of the guys you've not, that you've gotten on campus but haven't
Mm-hmm.
had the chance to practice because they're not allowed to practice until after the quote unquote season ends.
Yeah.
So there's almost like a month versus a month of extra practice that you get with those new kids that you
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the opportunity to have before. And then
Mm-hmm.
I guess the only final part on this to me is, what about the seniors? What about the kids who played all year, played 2 3 years for the school, and they're not going to go and they're not going to get their opportunity to play in a bowl game?
Yeah, that is interesting. That really those practices that you mentioned, I I'll be honest, when we were talking about it, I forgot about them completely. But that is a big driving factor in why some of these teams like playing the bowl games. Really, why the playoff is beneficial for teams,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't like win the championship, is
Mm-hmm.
it gives you multiple weeks of practice with these kids that are on campus. Like it gives those guys a head start for these
Mm-hmm.
recruits that are on campus early. It's a big selling point. But for Notre Dame, they obviously had the feeling that all of the outside stuff and the way they felt, they were wronged enough those practices were not a plus anymore. They were not a plus enough of a plus
Mm-hmm.
to still play in this game.
Well, I guess we'll see. But we now have our we now have our college football playoff situation set up, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll have more than plenty time between now and you know January to talk about the games. But it just it was kind of a bizarre ending to a regular season, which had so many twists and turns in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one that you could kind of see coming though. Like it felt like
Yeah.
the committee had set themselves up to be ridiculed in their final rankings prior to this, like prior to Sunday. That week prior, the penultimate rankings,
Hmm.
it felt like the committee had opened themselves up for criticism.
Well,
Um, the
yeah,
way they did it,
yeah.
and whether or not you like the decision or agree with the decision, the fact of the matter is that as mad as Notre Dame people are, and as happy as Miami people are, and whatever you feel about Alabama, the one thing that everybody came away with
Hmm.
out of this entire season is the committee's a problem, and it's not a problem in a sense of like the people on it are necessarily a problem, but the way that they operate and the lack of accountability that they have overall, at least this is the way I see it, is you've got a group full of people that don't have to answer for their actions. They're in
Hmm.
charge of the most important process we have in college football as it stands
Hmm.
in deciding the college football playoff. And yet they just kind of get to do it under this guise of ambiguity that no one knows the process. They give us these guidelines, and then every week Hunter Yurachek has a different answer that contradicts the one that he gave earlier, or they contradict what they did last year over and over again. Like their protocol says they're supposed to rank them in groups. If they rank them in groups the way
Hmm.
that they say they do via their protocol, then this Notre Dame situation does not happen.
Right.
Notre Dame is behind Miami a couple of weeks ago when they got put in the same grouping, and you
Hmm.
can put those statistics head to head, and you see that Miami's got the better statistics. But they didn't do that. They didn't group them the way they were supposed to. They didn't rank them the way that they were supposed to by their guidelines, And now we're sitting in a situation where we just did 45 minutes on what Notre Dame has done and why it's on them, and the visuals and the optics and why everybody is upset. Everybody's upset because the committee did not do their job the correct way the first time around, and they didn't have to answer for it. Hunter Yurachek got up there on Saturday on College Game Day, and he gave you nothing answers. And then he got up there Sunday knowing what decision they had made, knowing the repercussions that would come with the decision they made in terms of the backlash and the public discourse of it all. And he gave a nothing answer. It was like he read it off a script, because when Reese Davis pushed further, he said the exact same thing that he said to the initial question that Reese Davis had. And it was a different question, but he gave the same answer. It was very clear that this was something that was set up and was going to happen. And it's not an issue with the fact that it happened. It's an issue as far as accountability and adhering to your own criteria for the committee.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting, and frankly, I would like to see them divorce themselves of the conferences, put in a group of pick 8 people from maybe former commissioners, former an independent panel, if you will, who sit down and make these decisions.
Yeah,
and then you've got, and I also think that having the show on ESPN every Tuesday night, where they explain where the numbering is and the weighting system, is setting themselves up for failure.
Yeah, because it happened a few weeks ago when Miami finally moved up enough to get into the same, or at least what was supposed to be the same grouping of teams, where they would rank teams in that grouping. Hunter Yurachek looked in the camera and said, "We think Notre Dame is a better football team right now." Now, the problem with that is that over the next few weeks that unfolded and they maintained in that same grouping, there was no result that was outstanding enough to warrant Miami all of a sudden being viewed as a better football team than Notre Dame, which was the verbiage that Yurachek used to describe it. And what it does is it opens it up to all this other like criticism that may or may not be fair, but it's going to be brought up. They're talking about the fact that the guy who's answering the questions is the athletic director at Arkansas. Oh, by the way, who did Notre Dame roll down to Arkansas and just pound? They went to Arkansas and they beat them 56-13. So, you'll have questions about that, and did it factor into the process? Another one that I was looking at and I thought about is did the rematch factor? Did that factor into this decision making? Because I look and I see Alabama and Oklahoma, that's a rematch. Tulane going to Ole Miss, that's a rematch as well. You have Notre Dame going to A&M, that's 3 rematches in the 4 first-round games right there.
Right.
Is that something that factored in? It feels like there's all these things, and you don't have any form of a definitive answer on what was thought or said in that committee room. And so you're allowed to you allow everybody to put their tinfoil hats on and hypothesize why college football is broken.
Yeah, no, there's no question, and it's disappointing, but still joke about you get what you pay for, and these situations with the conferences and how this whole thing breaks down, no one's ever going to be happy, whether it's just 12, 16, 132. Take it all the way back to all the teams that play in there, and just open it up and say, fine, we'll start the season. Playoffs start the season, right? And then, as you mentioned earlier, I don't know that we haven't, if this process continues, I don't know that basically the bowl system as it is right now makes any sense at all.
Yeah,
it's fine. You can go ahead and play the Charlie Brown Alligator Bowl between two schools that aren't in the playoffs and the kids go down and have a good time, great. That's wonderful. Um, but is it meaningful? It is, as we said, for practice for coaches. But if you're going to have kids that are going to opt out of it because they're afraid their draft stock is going to go, and then they have buyouts of contracts, and I mean this is becoming more and more of a cluster that just is getting to be more of a mess than it's actually worth.
Yeah, it's going to be broken. Like the system we have in place is broken. I don't have a definitive answer as to what is going to fix college football,
Mm-hmm.
but there's obvious change needed in terms of the playoff and the committee and the way it's done right now. There's
Mm-hmm.
change needed in the bowl system as well, because right now, it just from an outsider perspective, it just doesn't really seem all that worth it to a lot of teams. They don't draw massive crowds all the time. This is supposed to be something that's a financial draw for the city that's hosting it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is that happening as
And by
effective?
the way, puts up money to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. Are they recouping their financial investment in this bowl as effectively as they once did? Obviously, it's a community thing in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like everything is broken, and for as much as people are going to paint it as the sky is falling, the sky is not falling, because when push comes to shove, on what is it? Let me double check the date here. Like, yeah, on I think it's Jesus Christ. Are they on a Wednesday and a Thursday?
Yeah.
Um, but when those first round games come around, we can gripe and complain about the process all we want. But the fact of the matter is that everybody's going to turn their TV on because they love college football. And for the people that love it, it will continue to be there.
No, it's been there for a long time. The thing that bothers me, two things bother me. One, that the Rose Bowl is never going to be a Pac-12 Big Ten game again. That bothers
Yeah.
me because tradition. I enjoy tradition. It used to be back in the day when there were what we used to call New Year's Day bowl games. Um, there would be a 1 o'clock bowl game, which actually there were two of them. One was on ABC, one was on ESPN. Was the Outback Bowl in Tampa and the Orlando Citrus Bowl, followed by Notre Dame. I'm sorry, followed by the Rose Bowl game, which was followed by the Orange Bowl game, and then on ABC was the Sugar Bowl, and that was such a very nicely packed 1 day orgy of college football and of the highest level of college football.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, you're going to get the best teams in the playoffs. Okay, that's great. But now with just what we said, with players choosing to opt out and all that, these bowl games, which financially were beneficial for the people who sponsored them and who brought them into town, and who basically, I mean, when you go to a bowl game, you go in. Let's assume for the moment that it's on a Saturday or a Friday. You come in on a Tuesday. They have all kinds of fun things for the kids the players to do. There's practices, of course, but for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, they spend a lot of time having opportunities to do things that, and going to places they may never have been,
Mm-hmm.
and playing in iconic buildings like Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of a lot of kids. It's the first time that they've ever been to New York City or to Boston or to or if you're from the north, down to Miami. It's a situation where they also give the kids, because they work with a bunch of different promotions companies, a lot of swag stuff. So you might get an Xbox, or you might get, some sort of swag bag that you're not going to get, and as a senior, it's what I was pushing on the senior bit. Um, it's one less time to say, you know what? Not only did we play, but we got to play in a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm sorry to see this whole process getting blown up, but it's just another in a long line of things that have changed the sport to push those of us who love it to the point of saying, I don't know how much more of this I can take.
Yeah. It used to feel like something special. Like I feel like the branding and the messaging around it prior to 2014
Hmm.
was how special the bowl games, those sites were.
Hmm.
You get to spend a week. It's almost like in a way it's team building in a
Yeah.
sense.
Hmm.
Um, that just doesn't it. They just don't have the same branding and appeal as they once did in terms of bowl games.
Yeah. Well, I think that, again, it's the changing of the process, and that's, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, like you said, I may be angry that the Orange Bowl isn't being played at night like it used to be. But will I watch it? Sure, I'll still watch it. I'll still watch the Rose Bowl. I'll still watch, you know, some of these, and I'm not going to watch the Weed Eater Bowl. But no offense to Weed Eater people. But there's, there will be choices, and we'll see what goes on from there. But it's been an interesting weekend. Tomorrow we'll chat about the NFL, where there's been some crazy games over the weekend.
Mhm.
And there's a good game tonight between the Eagles and Chargers, which should be a very entertaining game. By the way, um, ESPN is having on the Deuce on ESPN2. They're having one of their animated, you know, opportunities for kids to watch the game, and it's the Monsters Inc. game.
Mhm.
So if you're a fan of Monsters Inc., um, you'll get to see the gang tonight, on ESPN2 and on Disney Plus. So there's another way of watching a game and not having to worry about listening to Joe and and Troy.
Mhm.
If you're not a Joe and Troy fan, you can watch the game in real time, which is going to be kind of fun. We'll see how that works out. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's tonight. We'll delve into what was an incredibly bizarre weekend in professional football,
Mhm.
with a lot of controversial games and endings. And in the NFC South, nobody wants to win the division, clearly. So they're playing that game. And Pittsburgh ekes out a win, over Baltimore in a game where suddenly, um, it was turned back the clock day for Aaron Rodgers. He was actually good again. So,
Yeah.
we'll see how this all works out. But things are starting to get in Kansas City. Of course, losing really puts them in the eight ball position, and they have they got a lot of work to do to get back to the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. I do think it's interesting, and I know really has to do with ESPN and the NFL package they get, so they don't
Mm-hmm.
have a bunch of control over it. They're doing a kids outreach game on a Monday night at
Mm-hmm.
8 p.m. I I don't know the schedule of kids everywhere, but I can tell you I got a 6 year old little sister that goes to bed at like 7.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really a time where there's going to be a large child audience, I would think.
I think because the game's going to be available afterwards on Disney Plus. I think that's where they're going to get their audience.
Yeah.
You're right. Most of the kids who could watch the game, you know, even if their parents were being overly helpful would get them to maybe halftime.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was interesting.
So, yeah, it's the you're right. I have a nephew who is 7 years old, and he loves to sit down and literally chart the plays along the way. Um, I'm not sure if he's going to be a coach. He's definitely not going to be a player. Um, so maybe he's getting his offensive coordinator skills in. Um, and with some of the situations we've seen in offensive skills situations, at 9 years old, he might end up being the offensive coordinator for somebody. Um,
Yeah.
but but anyway, yeah, it's gonna be fun. It'll be fun. It'll be on ESPN2 tonight and also on Disney Plus. So if you have a kid and you want to see them, give them a chance to watch the game with the Monsters Inc. crew. By all means, it'd be a lot of fun to do that. Well,
Yep.
all right. So we know who's not going to bowl games. Maybe later, it's not that. As a matter of fact, what it's let me check. I think yeah, actually, we're only about less than a week away from our first bowl game.
Yeah, Bulls run from the well, supposedly they start on Saturday
Right.
actually
Mhm.
with Army Navy. Um,
Oh, okay. So
who
Army Navy is Saturday.
Army Navy they play at 3 p.m. on Saturday,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then they're
In
also
Baltimore. Yeah.
we also have the Cricket Celebration Bowl, which will be at 12 on ABC on Saturday between South Carolina State and Prairie View. And
Okay.
then at 8 on ABC next Saturday, we will have Boise State and Washington in the Bucked Up LA Bowl. I don't know
Okay.
what the heck that is, but sure.
All right. Well, somebody playing at SoFi, so we know that much. It
Yep.
was it was the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl the first year it was put up.
Yeah, it was.
He put the
Yeah,
money up for the bowl.
yeah,
So
which is
you know,
what an odd
um,
bowl.
sorry.
I said that's just such a strange bowl, just based
Yeah.
on like the timing of it. I guess really is what's odd, but
Well, I mean, it's funny because that bowl actually was further down the line,
hmm
so they moved it back. I don't know why.
yeah,
They moved it to that, but all these bowls. There's only, I believe, there's only two bowls that are not tied into, and we're talking about not New Year's Six bowl games, but we're talking about all the rest of them. I think only the Sun Bowl, which is a CBS bowl,
hmm
is the everything else is an ESPN bowl.
let's see here. Scrolling through, just kind of looking at it.
Mhm.
So you obviously have TNT has their deal with the college football playoff.
Yeah, but that's subcontracted from ESPN.
Yeah, so they've got two of those playoff games on TNT, True TV, HBO. But and scrolling through this list, it appears that you are correct. We've got the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, which will be broadcast from the CW network between Miami of Ohio and Fresno State on December 27th.
That's a subcontract.
And then yeah, the Sun Bowl, which is Arizona State and Duke on the 31st, which is broadcast by CBS.
Hmm.
Yeah, but aside from that, okay, so the Trust and Will Holiday Bowl between Arizona and SMU, which is held on January 2nd, is broadcast by Fox.
Okay.
That is Fox's one bowl game.
Right.
The Sun Bowl is CBS's one bowl game. And
Well, and remember the college playoffs. TNT's involved in that.
yeah, those are the two games.
Right.
They get the you made they the executives at TNT probably feel like the short end of the stick in the fact that they get the two games that involve the group of five teams.
Right. Well, they did last year too.
Yeah.
So then that will all change in the new contract where NBC and and ABC and Fox will all have um, championship games and also uh, playoff games. But that doesn't take effect until 2027, 2028.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a little bit of time left for that. But yep, it was a wild regular season that's all over now. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll see how life goes. But very entertaining, and it's given us a lot to talk about. That's for darn sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just as the craziness of one sport ends in
Yeah.
college football,
The-
it I was just gonna say it backs us right up into I would say probably another point of craziness in a different sport with the MLB having their winter meeting starting this week.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So
Hmm.
we'll have that going on. We'll have the rest of the pro football season.
Yep.
So nothing like good old fashioned hot stove baseball to talk about, because that's where people like you and I can make trades that nobody wants, but we can at least fantasize about it, uh,
Yeah.
and
Hey,
have fun with that.
we're apparently not the only ones making stuff up. Bob Nightingale reported the other day that Zach Gallen was close to a deal with the Cubs,
What?
and he put that out, and it was out there for about 5 to 10 minutes before Jeff Passan tweets and says Zach Gallen is not in agreement with any team and is not currently close to a deal. So you're going to have people. That's
A reporter on reporter crime here going on.
yeah. That's the amazing thing about the MLB and its hot stove. It's like
Yeah.
with the NFL and college football, even the NBA, it feels like there's like a generally pretty consistent reporting throughout the sport.
Mhm.
When it comes to the MLB and its hot stove, John Heyman may say one thing, Ken Rosenthal has another, Jeff
Right.
Passan has
Yeah,
another.
Bassett has another one. Yeah.
So like it,
Buster Olney has one.
the reports just seem to be all over the place all the time in baseball.
Well, it's basically agents telling you what's going on.
Yeah, that's and
I've been
you
on
know,
the inside of that, and you'll get a text from an agent, you'll get a text from a general manager, you'll get a text from a couple of players who will say, hey, look, I just spoke to so and so, he's coming to play for us, and you're like, yep, well, I'm not buying that yet.
mhm,
Hopefully
yeah,
we'll figure it out, but nah, let's wait till, especially anybody who's a Scott Boras client.
yeah.
you
Well, I
know.
mean, heck, what's it called? You go back to the trade deadline this past season, and you look at there were reports that said Boston was close to a deal with Minnesota for Joe
Right.
Ryan, and then there's reports that were saying they were nowhere close. The only difference was somebody got their report from Boston, and the other person got their report from Minnesota.
Sure.
Boston thought they were close, Minnesota didn't. So that's as easy as it can be in terms of the conflicting reports in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and if they're nothing if not consistent.
Yep.
I will say, if you want to follow someplace that does a very good job of curating um, the rumors and what is fact and what is rumor, MLB Trade Rumors has always been a very reliable and very credible source
Mm-hmm.
to track, and it's free, so that's good too. And it even gives you the you know who broke the story or who's leaking the story out to them. They're very transparent in where they get their information. So if you are a hot stove league fan like myself, you follow those guys. They're pretty good about it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, alrighty. Well, uh, unlike Notre Dame, we will be involved in ball games this time around, and we'll have some fun talking about. Tomorrow we'll talk about the NFL because it's getting crazy, and we're starting to see where there aren't that many games left, and there are a lot of questions to be answered.
Yep.
So there you go, boys and girls. Have a great one. For Matthew, I'm Jim. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.